the member. David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I mean, this issue is obviously an important issue where we want to try and get the balance right between our need to protect New Zealanders and at the same time protect our human rights. And we have agreed for this bill to be, at the first reading, to be referred to the Select Committee. But we have asked for that Select Committee process and the referral back to the Parliament to be for the 10th of February next year rather than next week. And let's just think about that. I mean, it is now Tuesday. Tomorrow we will likely meet as the Select Committee to discuss how we're going to be doing that. We are likely to have just 2 days to hear submissions from some of the organisations that Chris Finlayson talked about, the Law Society, the Human Rights Commission, the Privacy Commission, many of those other organisations, and others that want to speak. And they're going to have 2 days for that, and then we're going to have to consider, deliberate and come back to this Parliament by Monday next week. Well, look, if we are really serious about the fact that this is an important issue, and it is, then for heaven's sake, let's give it and accord this issue the importance that it deserves by allowing the time that it needs in order to be able to make good quality decision making around that. Just those organisations themselves had a very limited time to have a look through a 47-page bill. When we received the bill late last week, I spoke to the Prime Minister's office and said, well, actually, what you should be doing is making this bill, releasing this bill to every party and to those organisations in particular who you are going to want to hear from, because they will inform your decision-making around making this bill a better piece of legislation. That didn't come out until Sunday. So now these organisations and the parties, other parties here in the Parliament have received it on Sunday, and they have effectively 3 days to be able to digest that and be able to make a decision. So that's just simply not adequate for a piece of legislation that is as important as this. And we do want to, let's get it right, we do want to make sure that we get the legislation right, and we do want to make sure that it is a bipartisan effort. And I think the best way we can do that is the amendment which Chris Hipkins put forward just a few minutes ago, which is to push back the report back to the Parliament for the 10th of February. I want to say that I would like particularly to hear, apart from those organisations, I would like the Muslim community in New Zealand to be able to be given the opportunity to come before the Select Committee. This is certainly targeted at the Muslim or members of the Muslim community. The senior members that I have spoken to, and Phil Goff and I met with them deliberately on this issue last week. We had dinner together with a number of the senior members of their community. They are themselves very anxious to make sure that this legislation and the safeguards are put in place so that if there is any person that might step over the line, that they are apprehended. But at the same time, they can do a lot to ease the fears of the others in the Muslim community that they are being picked on. And they need time, and they need the ability to come before the Select Committee and provide their input. And I believe that we will, as a result of that, both from those organisations we talked about and that community, we are going to have a much better result than we would have if we didn't have at all. So there are some thorny issues in this piece of legislation. It's not simple. We've got the issue of the passports, which we've spoken about before in the first reading. The issue of the 48 hours of warrantless surveillance. That's an issue that I think many of us feel very uncomfortable about. We've had some feedback from the government that they're willing to think about options around that, and we welcome that. I think that's a good move, that we were able to engage honestly on trying to find the best way forward, but that takes time. that doesn't get done in an afternoon. It doesn't get done after 10 minutes of hearing somebody like the Law Society. We're going to need time to be able to deliberate properly. And of course we can meet through whatever the weekend, but that still means it's very rushed. And a number of members tonight have spoken about and compared the way that we have done this with other countries in the world. We've got Australia who've got two select committees hearing their foreign fighters legislation as we speak. They are not trying to put it through in the same haste as we are. The Brits, slightly different legislation, but in the UK, the United Kingdom, they are introducing the bill, I think, tomorrow, and they won't expect to have a report back until May. That is an adequate length of time that will now enable them to have give the bill the consideration that it needs to have. We're not asking for, we understand the importance of the bill. We're not asking for the bill to take 6 months, but we are asking for it to take longer than 2 days, because 2 days is effectively what we're going to have once we put this, when we put this bill up. So, sir, I think the onus is really on the government. If the government wants to put this through in this time period, I think they have to make the case to us. You've got to say, this is very important because of security situation, of right in front of us right now, of an event that's coming up. What is it that requires us to have this legislation go through so quickly? So far, all we've heard is that we need to have it through before Christmas, before the House rises, for the year. Well, that's interesting, but that's not really an adequate rationale for putting through a piece of legislation which has so much impact on not only our security but also on our human rights, our privacy and everything else as well. We want to hear the case. I think the government owes it to this Parliament and to the people of New Zealand to present the case. Why do we need to have this through by the end of this week so that we can refer it back to the Parliament next week? And we haven't heard that yet. We have not heard that, and I don't think that's reasonable. We are willing to work with them. We've said that. We are willing to come alongside. We'll do what needs to be done in order to ensure that this legislation gets across the line in an adequate and proper way. But what we do want to know is, why is it that this government wants to push this through in the haste that it does at the moment? And for that reason, we are supporting and want to put forward the amendment to reintroduce the legislation back on to the 10th of February. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.